Good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viaud. Thank you for joining us tonight. Once again, we have a very exciting program to bring you this evening. One of the top questions I receive from most of our supporters around the country is, how do we get young people involved with this movement? Well, tonight we've got some special young people to tell you about two amazing programs we have at Convention of States for our young people. Also joining me for tonight's interview segment will be one of our favorite and frequent guests, former Texas state legislator, the founder and president of Patriot Academy. Yes, I'm talking about America's Constitution coach, Rick Green. Now it's time for an introduction to Convention of States, and tonight we get to hear from supporters of ours in Mississippi, Derek and Paula. Over to you.
The principles that the founding of this country is based upon. We're a constitutional republic. That is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and not the other way around, not having people for the government. All right, so that's, and I'm just getting just to the point where I think the government is just too large, too intrusive, and too unaccountable.
And you know what else? We found out that we have a lot more in common with each other than we have in opposition. And I'm ready to volunteer and do whatever it takes for us to move forward in this cause.
And as that old Chinese proverb says, right, it is better to light one candle than to curse the darkness.
Yes.
Oh, I love that right there. So well said from Derek. Thank you to you and to Paula. And Derek's last line in particular, lighting the candle instead of cursing that darkness. America is the shining city on a hill. Our nation has the light of freedom and liberty that is the envy of the entire world. And yet we are in danger of watching as that light is extinguished by an overbearing, intrusive federal government. We simply cannot allow that to happen. And the best way to fight back is by encouraging our state legislators to pass the COS resolution, which calls for an Article 5 convention to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, reduce the size and scope of the federal government, and place term limits on members of Congress and federal officials. Furthermore, our organization's mission takes us beyond a convention as we seek to build an engaged army of self-governing grassroots activists, or the way I prefer to define it, to reestablish a culture of self-governance. We have the solution big enough to solve the problems caused by the federal government, the solution that keeps the flame of freedom burning. And all we need is for you to join to help us advance our movement. So join us now by going to conventionofstates.com/act. Okay, now this is the part of the program where we typically pivot to our 5 for 5 segment, but tonight we want to share two amazing programs we have available here at Convention of States that involve our young people. And to talk about these two amazing programs, we have two amazing young people. Joining us tonight, we have Jack McPherson, our ELP Strategic Development Manager, and Esther Cook, our Leaders Launchpad Coordinator. Good evening to the both of you.
Evening, Jonathan.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All right. So to start with, I'd love for each of you to answer the question that we get often, which is, how exactly do we reach and engage with the young people of America? Esther, chivalry is not dead here, so we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Jack.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. It's a great question. And I think one of the biggest things that I see in people of my generation, myself included, is really the desire to be involved in something meaningful, not just superficially scrolling social media. I think we can all kind of see through the veneer that that's not the life we want. And it can be easy to feel disconnected from everything that's going on in politics, that there's just a lot of old people in there, and it's not connected to what we care about. And so I think we're really trying to change that and show the younger generation, no, we actually need your voice in this fight for liberty for our country, and showing them here's a practical way you can get involved, and really developing them as leaders so that they're not just getting thrown into the fire.
Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that Esther's absolutely right. They want to feel connected. And another great way you make them feel connected is, I mean, you do show them how important they are by giving them a real responsibility. And that's what we do at the Emerging Leaders Program. That's what Esther does and with her team over at Leaders Launchpad. How do you reach young people? Well, you entrust to them real responsibility, and you teach them along the way about how to responsibly handle those things that they're assigned, those tasks. And it's not menial tasks either, it's meaningful tasks. And along the way, you're teaching them not just, hey, here's how to do these things better. You're also teaching them how to be better people. So we also help to form their minds, yes, but their hearts. And that's another key part of the Leaders Launchpad and Emerging Leaders program, is the one-on-one mentorship. And so we get to sit across the table. I mean, it is virtual, our programs are remote, so it's a virtual table, if you will, but we get to have hours and hours and hours of one-on-one conversations with these young people and hear about their lives and their stories, and help clear obstacles out of their way to move from the person that they are to becoming the people that they ought to be. So it's a really beautiful work. And that's how you reach young people. You just be real with them and love on them, help them grow in their work and in their personal lives.
So well said by both of you. And to me, I think one of the special things about these programs is the fact that we take the time to invest in the young people's character development, right? It's not just about, the nuts and bolts of grassroots activism or politics or anything, but actually investing in these young people and developing their character, focusing on virtue. It's just wonderful. So Jack, tell us a little bit more about exactly what the Emerging Leaders program is all about.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been on kind of a roadshow with many of our grassroots volunteers and with our regional teams and state teams. So those of you who've maybe heard this diatribe from me, I appreciate it. Appreciate your patience with me. But the Emerging Leaders program is a 9-month academic year program where we teach college students, college-age students. You don't have to be in college to be it, but college-age range students. We teach them servant leadership. We teach them the Western heritage. We teach them about American constitutionalism and the American heritage. And then we take a look at some case studies and core criteria that you need to consider if you're going to be an American statesman. So we teach them the true criteria of an American statesman by the time that we're done. And it's all academic year long, and it's very academically heavy, but it's also one-on-one mentorship, professional development taking place that whole time. It's paid, it's remote. Additionally, this coming year, our program will be accredited, so students can opt in to receive 12 hours of college credit from our program. And as I said earlier, it's completely remote. Students from all around the country, from where they're at, can apply for that program. And so our website is cosinternship.com. If you want to go check it out there, go click on Apply Now on the top right and browse around that website. And if it's something that you like, please get in touch with us and hit that apply button.
And what's the deadline for the applications?
For both ELP and for Leaders Launchpad, our application windows will close on July 31st this summer.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Jack. So Esther, tell us a little bit more about Leaders Launchpad.
So similarly to the ELP, we really love to invest in the interns. And so we start with servant leadership development. We go through, going through the principles of what made our nation great, what being a citizen looks like today, and really mentoring these people. Like we talked about before, it's about who you become more than just what you do. And then with Leaders Launchpad, one of the really cool things is the interns get to participate in their state grassroots teams, participate in in-person experiences, experience that front lines of what does it look like to go to my state capitol? What does it look like to engage members of my community, maybe their family, their friends, people they don't even know, and really get a sense for what being an engaged citizen looks like. And the other really special thing about Leaders Launchpad is that the time commitment is just 5 to 10 hours a week. It's something that a lot of our interns, they're going full-time at college or they're working a job, sometimes both. And this is something that they can do alongside of that, because you don't need to be pursuing a career necessarily in politics or spending half of your time every month in that to really make a meaningful difference in your community, in our nation, and saving liberty. And so it's something that's designed to be very meaningful, but within a shorter time commitment. And so it's really an awesome experience. We have a lot of really great people go through it, and we'd love to have you apply. You can go to cosleaderslaunchpad.com. you'll get more information about the program and can also apply there if you're interested in spending a year with us. So.
And Esther, Leaders Launchpad is a fairly new program that we've offered, right? I believe maybe your brainchild.
Yeah, so I started about, I want to say 3.5 years ago. My math could be wrong on that. Time's a little weird right now, but yeah, so it's been about 3.5 years, still a toddler program, and we're just super excited to see the lives. 14 graduates so far have been through the program, and just said it's been life-changing for them and way more in depth than what they've got in college. And I think that's something that goes for both Leaders Launchpad and the ELP. Is it's like the depth of relationships, finding people that, wow, other people that think like me, just really diving deep into our Constitution, Western civilization, what that looks like, and not just carrying coffee in the practical work, but actually making a difference with every hour that they spend.
So well said. And both of these programs are truly incredible. And both of these wonderful young people that we have with you have come through our Emerging Leaders program, and they're still here. And so many others as well in the Convention of States movement. And part of our national staff are young people that started in the Emerging Leaders program and have continued on. Of course, it's not just to be a part of Convention of States. Many of these young people then go on to careers elsewhere, but they always remember this special program that ties it together. And so I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to share these programs with the young people of America. Now, we're running a little short on time, but I do want to give both of you an opportunity to kind of close things up and give us any final comments that you have. And Esther, we'll come back to you.
Absolutely. Well, really just encourage you also, if you're a state team member, these interns work with the local state team. And so I would encourage you to find a young person in a non-creepy way, okay? But find a young person, maybe, between 18 and 25, who you think would really appreciate this mentorship, this training, this experience, and encourage them to apply. And you can really make a difference for them and also for your state team, and getting somebody who comes full of energy, wants to make a big difference.
And Jack, you've got the final word.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I also just wanted to call out a few things. The Emerging Leaders Program, Leaders Launchpad, we're growing. Leaders Launchpad is starting initiatives to reach around high school age students, to teach them about the fundamental things that are required of an American citizen and what being an American citizen means and what it requires. And then over the Emerging Leaders Program, we're growing our program. We want to reach more students. We want to have larger cohorts. We want to have more staff. Next year, we're hoping to start a summer program, a 10-week intensive for students who are interested in that as well. And then just to tease it for y'all, something that we're having serious internal institutional conversations about is, do we want to eventually grow into being a degree granting institution? Higher education in this country is completely broken, and Convention of States is actively growing in terms of getting into the education space, and it is through these two programs. And so I call all this out and tease it all to you to say, with all of the time and support that you give, or if you're a newcomer to a show like this or to an organization like COS, I want to say thank you for everything that you've already given. And I also want to ask that you prayerfully consider making a gift in support of the Emerging Leaders Program and Leaders Launchpad. And you can do that by going to cosinternship.com. There's a donate button in the top right, and the same for cosleaderslaunchpad.com. Again, there's also a donate button in the top right. If you would mind, prayerfully consider making a financial gift, and feel free to get in touch with us at any point in time. My email is jmcpherson@selfgovern.com. That's JMCPHERSON @selfgovern.com. And if you email that email, we can get in touch and talk about support. So thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Esther. And ladies and gentlemen, that would be money well worth spent. So please consider that donation today for these programs. We're so grateful for them. And before you guys go, I want to give you just how much our audience appreciates you. I don't know if you saw it come up on the screen there. Producer G shared it, but Art Binhack said both Esther and Jack are very well spoken and very impressive. And Mike Defendahl said, not surprising because Esther is a rock star with COS Toastmasters. So you have fans out here in the COS family. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
God bless you both. Have a great night. All right. So yes, 2 incredible programs, and we have incredible young people in charge of these programs, and just so grateful that we had the opportunity to share a little more about them tonight. All right, now it's time for Andrew Lusch with COS Now.
Fired in Idaho by Convention of States. Well, not real shots, obviously.
I know what you're thinking.
But let's just say we took out some politicians in Idaho. Don't look at me like that, you know what I mean. Scalps were taken, heads were rolling, figuratively speaking, of course. We crushed it in every single Idaho primary race we targeted, picking off 3 incumbents who opposed Convention of States, and slaying other Article 5 opponents in other races. Sherry Vollmer unseated incumbent Representative David Levitt, who opposed Convention of States, and she did it by a margin of 10 points. Brian Beckley blew out COS opponent Representative Faye Thompson 59-41. Senator Josh Cole, another COS opponent, was defeated by Casey Swenson in another decisive victory for Convention of States, a staggering 58-42. In a race for an open House seat, Kelly Walton defeated Greg Firk, a former state representative who opposes Convention of States. On his weekly battle cry, Convention of States President Mark Meckler had this to say.
Our level of support just went up dramatically in Idaho, and we removed a bunch of our opponents. And I think we sent a message. We could have done a lot more, but we weren't looking for a bloodbath. We're looking for cooperation. We just wanted to show people, look, if we have to, we're going to take people out. And folks got to deal with this. That's just the way it works. And we're going to continue to remove people who oppose us.
You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
It may not have been a bloodbath, but the damage was certainly surgical. These 6 incredible victories put Idaho on the shortlist to become state number 21 to join the Convention of States Alliance. All right, switching over to Rhode Island. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a public hearing on Convention of States Action's Article 5 resolution. Here's COS volunteer Barbara Lardner.
What do Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Congressman Seth Magaziner of Rhode Island have in common? Both, on multiple occasions, have introduced amendments to the U.S. Constitution to impose term limits on members of Congress. But unfortunately, I believe it is all for show. I don't believe that Congress will limit its own power. We need an Article 5 Convention of the States to bring accountability back to government.
On May 19th, the Louisiana team helped pass a bill entitled the Protection of Constitutional Liberties in Louisiana Act. HB 635 establishes new legal provisions within Louisiana law to counteract the influence of foreign adversaries and terrorist organizations. Go Team Louisiana, that's right. Mark Meckler continues to spread the word about Convention of States in the media, including on The Steve Gruber Show and Unclassified.
All right, let me bring you Mark. Mark, you are on the tip of the spear on Article 5, a constitutional convention. Explain what that is, and do you believe there's a deep state that is resisting that or would fight that? I think they would.
There's not only a deep state, it runs DC, and it runs it from administration to administration. I think Trump's doing the best job ever and the best job he can do of rooting this out, but it will self-heal as soon as Trump is gone. It will repair itself and it will live on unless we, the people, intervene to cut off its lifeblood.
What's your timeline? I only got about a minute here. So what's your timeline to get to 34?
Yeah, I think there's 2 paths. One is, I think, the natural timeline, 6 to 7 years. Trump has already come out in support. If the administration starts more actively supporting, I think we could get it done before Trump ends his presidency.
I'm closing this episode out with more snapshots sent in by the Convention of States volunteers, including petition gathering in New Jersey, Idaho, and Florida. The Indiana team participated in a Memorial Day parade, and the New Jersey team turned out for their annual Capitol Day. Well, we emptied our clip for this episode, so I gotta reload. Until next time, this is Andrew Lusch.
I think Andrew Luce is now reloaded. Man, wow, great stuff there. And big shout out I want to highlight is what went on in Idaho, going 6 for 6 in those elections. Just incredible work by our Idaho team and all of our grassroots activists, because we have been having our teams make phone calls from around the nation, contacting voters, encouraging to get them out to vote in Idaho, but in other elections as well. And I want to mention some of these other ones that didn't make it. We were 5 for 8 in Nebraska. We were 8 for 11 in races in Montana, 10 for 14 in races in South Dakota, and 6 for 8 in races in Iowa. That means we were 35 of 47 in the races that we got involved in with Convention of States. 75% of the races we were involved in, our candidate won. I want to again thank all of our grassroots activists for all of their hard work. This is incredible stuff, and it helps us move the ball forward for Convention of States. And we're not done. We've got more elections coming up later on in the summer that we're going to be getting involved in. And so if you aren't involved, now's the time to get involved. Join us. Be a part of our Telepatriot team. You can help us in making these phone calls to encourage voters to get out and have a huge impact on these elections. Again, thank you to all of our grassroots activists who did participate in that. Also have a couple of other things that I want to bring to your attention tonight. First is the Convention Courier, which is our newsletter that goes out each month, and we have the Q1 newsletter that's available for you right now on the website. There's a picture of it right there on the screen. Victory in Kansas being state number 20. If you want to access this and read a little bit more about what's in our Convention Courier, you can go to conventionofstates.com/blog and search for using the word courier, and that will bring up this wonderful document that we send out in a newsletter. Again, we send them out each quarter, and this one will tell you all about what we've accomplished in Q1 for Convention of States, including Kansas's victory. So you want to check that out. Also, just a reminder that coming up in June, we've got some exciting holidays. First and foremost, on June 14th, well, actually, everything's happening on June 14th, or so it seems. We have Flag Day, right, which is a great American holiday. Of course, you have the opportunity to tell your young ones about Betsy Ross and maybe even hang the Betsy Ross flag like I usually do, although I think I need a new one. Also, on June 14th is a happy birthday to our United States Army, who I believe is turning 251 years old this year. I believe the day after that, June 15th, is actually when George Washington received his commission to become Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Also on June 14th is President Donald Trump's birthday, and I think he's celebrating by having a big UFC fight on the lawn of the White House. And hold on, I don't want to hear anybody talk about all of the terrible things that go on at the White House. There are some horrible things that have really gone on. This is not a bad thing to have UFC going on there. And I think there's a tradition. In fact, Rick Green's probably going to tell us a little bit about that tradition that goes back to a previous president when it comes to this kind of fighting on the lawn of the White House. So be sure to check out all of those things happening this month. Lots of other things as well. We try to celebrate these as much as possible. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Also, I want to harken back to our last episode when we had Steve Deace, our dear friend and endorser from Blaze TV. He was on our program. He just had his new book released. And let me tell you, this is a book that you want to get for your young children that are out there. It's called Why Independence Day, a great read for America 250. This is actually, it says Why Independence Day, America is great because God is good. And it tells all about the history of America and our founding, but it does so from a different perspective. It goes all the way back to I believe the slavery, the Israelites that were enslaved in Egypt and they're coming out of it. And of course, the coming of Christ and how all of that paved the way for the founding of America. Yes, America is a Christian nation. We have Christian roots in our country. Steve Deace tells us all about it and so much more. This is Mark Meckler's Independence Day pick. So be sure to look for that wherever major books are sold. And that's it from me. Now we're going to move on to our interview. And I will mention that we did record this interview with Rick Green earlier this morning because he is actually on a flight right now. I hope he's traveling safely. He's going to be meeting with some other pastors and folks at the White House tomorrow. But we were very glad that we were able to have the time with him this morning. And so without further ado, here's that interview. have the great pleasure of welcoming back to the program former Texas state legislator, the founder and president of Patriot Academy, America's Constitution coach, the Honorable Rick Green. Rick, how are you doing today, sir?
You forgot the most important part, John. You forgot Mark Meckler's Uber driver. Mark Meckler's #1 Uber driver. That's the most important title of all the things I do, and you didn't even include it, man. I wonder. I'm going to go check the app right now and see how the tips are from Meckler lately, because he must have not mentioned it to you. Yep.
He must not have. Yeah. So that was my bad. My bad there, Rick. And we so appreciate that you are Mark's personal Uber driver.
Thank you. Yes. He doesn't make me wear a hat or anything, but yeah, I do have to run out of gas once in a while to keep him happy. That's part of the deal. But hey, man, it's good to be back. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as we are speaking right now, we are 1 month and 1 day away from America's 250th birthday. It sounds like folks at Freedom 250 and President Trump have a lot of exciting things planned for our big bash. And there have been a lot of great events that have already taken place. While the media may prefer to focus on a bunch of self-righteous, third-rate musicians that chose politics over celebrating America, I have been particularly encouraged by the events that have taken place, like the recent America Reads the Bible and the Rededicate 250 prayer gathering on the National Mall, which have highlighted our nation's Christian heritage and the role of faith in our founding. More than ever, I think we need to boldly stand by the fact that America is a Christian nation. Patriot Academy has been on the front lines on this through biblical citizenship courses, reclaiming liberty courses, and so much more. Rick, what do you want Americans to remember most about our Christian roots as we celebrate this milestone?
Man, well, first of all, just gratitude today for the fact that we have an administration that's willing to highlight everything you just mentioned. It could have been so different, man. I remember back in 2022, I think it was, starting to work on this in earnest and looking ahead, to this year, and the commissions, the appointees, the people that were going to be in charge of all these celebrations and all of the incredible moments were radical leftist, and even the website, the videos they were making, even back then to prepare for 3 or 4 years later, it was all crazy leftist propaganda, really redefining who America is and who we were in our founding. And I got really concerned. I started shouting the alarm to all of our friends with the big organizations, saying we're going to have to do our own thing to try to counter what the federal government's going to be doing to really lie about who we are as a people. Well, thank the good Lord for the election of 2024, totally different administration. Obviously, the president has been just amazing at bringing all the right people into the White House to get to basically give the history, to say, here's these incredible moments in America's history that need to be highlighted. Here's the things that the founders talked about. I mean, and I'm talking people like, Larry Arnn from Hillsdale to PragerU to us at Patriot Academy and Wall Builders and all of these people that they've brought in to help shape the narrative to basically revive patriotism. There was a great quote from Ronald Reagan 40 years ago where he said, if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that will lead to an erosion of the American spirit. And that's what happened. We stopped teaching all these wonderful stories and we lost our patriotism. Well, man, that's been turned around this year. I mean, this has been just celebration after celebration, and we're down to, like you said, roughly a month here before the big day. But I do want to say right up front, it doesn't stop on July 4th, 2026. The 250th is really the year between July 4th, 2026 and July 4th, 2027. So we have a whole year to cement this thing, not just fireworks and hot dogs and all that, but actually saying, what are we celebrating? Like, what is this the 250th of? It's the 250th of the Declaration of Independence. What is the Declaration? And then get people to go through and actually read it, talk about it, dive into the principles that come from it. It's the greatest government document ever written, and it really does give us a chance to celebrate what you just described, the faith of our founders, the faith of our founding. 4 times the Creator is mentioned in the Declaration, a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. So it even becomes really a prayer saying, God, we know that we're doing this based on the rights that you gave us, not that any government or any general or any government document gives us. So it really is it's the perfect opportunity with the 250. So I'm of course in kind of red, white, and blue nirvana. So it's like everybody talking about these things just gets me in my happy place, bro.
I hear you. I feel like I should have grabbed my tricorn hat for this interview because that's how I feel. Every morning I feel like I need to put one on. So a lot of great points you mentioned there, Rick, and I do want to come back to that thought about that it doesn't end on July 4th in a minute, because I think that's a really key point that you made there. But with a month to go before we get this thing started, really not finished, but started, there may be people who are only now getting excited about the celebration and wondering how they can contribute. What would you recommend members in our audience do to prepare to celebrate America's 250 in a way that would truly honor our founders?
Great question, man. Great question. First of all, don't feel like you have to be the expert. Don't feel like you have to have the biggest bash in the country. Man, just get together with friends and family on July 4th. Read the Declaration out loud. Have we're doing blown up copies where people can come forward and sign the document themselves after reading it. And I'm talking about reading not just the 56 words we usually talk about. We hold these truths, that part, but also go through the grievances. Read all 27 grievances. Read those final paragraphs where it talks about why they felt constrained, meaning they had to do this. So anyway, read the document, get people to sign lives, fortune, sacred honor, and commit to a year of rebuilding liberty, a year of giving of their lives, fortune, sacred honor. I kind of boil it down to 222. Give 2 hours a week for that year, taking a Constitution class through Convention of States, doing 2% of their fortune, donating more either to Convention of States or to a candidate or to the local soup kitchen or putting on Constitution classes, whatever, 2% of their income, and then 2 times a week giving of their sacred honor, putting their reputation on the line by sharing a post of somebody talking about the 250th or a principle out of the Declaration. So 222, lives, fortune, sacred honor, 2 hours of your life a week, 2% of your fortune, and 2 times a week putting your reputation on the line by simply standing up and speaking truth. Everybody can do that for the year, but kind of kicking it off on July 4th is a great way to start. Thankfully, the 4th, falls on a Saturday this year, so it's really easy to get people out on a Saturday. There's probably something going on in your community, wherever you are in the country, either at your church or at the county courthouse or whatever. But if not, if you haven't heard of anything being put together, man, just tell everybody, come over. Let's have a barbecue. We're even going to send out a video of the entire Declaration in about 50 different voices. In other words, it'll be like a different person saying each line. And so if you don't want to get up and read it yourself or get people at your event to read it, you can play that video and it'll go through the entire Declaration. So honestly, John, I think it's important to just tell people it's not complicated. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to have a big band playing. And I will say there's good news to announce today. You got all these bands dropping out and politics, blah, blah, blah. The good news is that the White House denied the application of the Mark Meckler and Rick Green band. So we will not be singing. So that is very good news for the entire nation. There will not be the pain of experiencing us singing. There'll actually be some folks like John Rich and others, I think, performing instead.
And, I think that is proof that Donald Trump truly is making America great again, isn't it?
And has good discernment, right?
That's right. Thank you so much. And, Rick, I also heard a lot about this organization, Freedom 250, I mentioned before. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about this Freedom Truck that's been going around?
Yeah, man, they're doing so many cool things. So Freedom 250 is basically the White House effort combined with a whole lot of private organizations like Patriot Academy and others. But the whole idea is to just have these ceremony may make people sound like it's too formal. Have fun, like have lots of celebrations. So Trump's doing the UFC card this weekend's going to be at the White House. They're building this massive dome and cage and all that. It's going to be incredible. I wish I was going because I'm a big UFC fan. But they're gonna do that, which is in the spirit of Teddy Roosevelt. He had boxing matches out on the White House lawn. So to Hillary Clinton and the others who are complaining, we won't talk about what her husband did with the White House. But anyway, for those people that are complaining, this is actually has a rich tradition from 100 years ago in America. So anyway, you got the UFC fights. There's going to be a Grand Prix, man. They're literally going to do an Indy 500 race around Washington, D.C. But these trucks, they're called the Freedom Trucks, and I think they have 6 of them, and they're sending them all over the country for the whole year. So even if you don't, if you can't get to one of these, you could actually book one. You could actually have a celebration in your hometown, maybe in, October or November, and get one of them to come. We're trying to get one to the Patriot Academy campus at some point in the next year. But this was a PragerU American Journey experience, and I'm trying to remember who the other part. I think Hillsdale might have helped with these as well, where they basically designed these trucks where when they pull up and they fold out, you get to walk through the American story and the revolution, and there's all these cool videos where Washington comes to life and talks to you, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, they did it top notch, top quality. Yeah, there's the video. You can see the trucks. And when you walk through, it's cool. American Journey. So, and American Journey is basically a partnership between David Barton and his library with Glenn Beck's library, which is, the 2 largest private collections in the country. And so they loaned a bunch of their stuff. You get to see Washington spectacles and all kinds of cool stuff when you go through the museum. So anyway, great opportunity to learn a lot of history in a short period of time. And I think I'm trying to remember where. Actually, they do have on that page some of the schedule, so they'll tell you where they're going. But I'd recommend, if you got a big COS group in your community or in your state, not necessarily for July 4th, because I know all 6 trucks are booked for July 4th, but look at doing something later, or maybe even just having one come to a COS rally that we're having. So it could be a great way to plug in. But the Freedom Truck's is another good one. I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff they're doing. Oh, I don't know if you've seen I don't know if you saw on New Year's Eve the way they lit up the Washington Monument. They did this whole light show. It was amazing. And they're going to do that again July 4th. If you're in the D.C. area, I mean, in Trumpian fashion, he's going to have the largest fireworks display in history. So I don't know how long it's going to go. You'll probably be able to see it from Texas, but it's going to be massive. So if you're in the Northeast, if you're in Texas or even anywhere close to Texas, we're going to have a big July 4th celebration here in Constitution City at the campus. Everybody's welcome to come to that. We love our friends from COS to come to that. So that'll be July 4th on that Saturday. That evening, we'll have Ben Franklin with us and George Washington, and we're going to have all kinds of cool, comedy and fireworks and hot dogs and signing of the Declaration. I don't know. I don't think I told you this. We've got we're building Independence Hall at the campus, but we haven't got it built yet. But we did build the interior to Independence Hall. So we already have all the cool tables and chairs and chandeliers and the paneling and all that cool stuff. So it looks just like the assembly room. We're going to go ahead and install a portion of that in our legislative hall, where a lot of the COS folks have been for trainings before. Our mock-up of the Texas House is built. Our legislative hall is built. We're going to take a corner of that big, huge room and install a display of a miniature part of the Independence Hall thing. So people can actually, on July 4th, walk through our legislative hall, walk into Independence Hall, and sign the Declaration on the president's table there. So that's going to be pretty cool. And I think we'll probably leave that up for the whole 250th. So we'll be doing some COS trainings at the campus. So there'll be other opportunities as well. But hey, man, July 4th, if you're close by or you want to drive in, come see us.
That is amazing. And Rick, where would they go if they wanted to get more information about that? Is that just to Patriot Academy's website?
Yeah. patriotacademy.com/250th. I think there's a link on the homepage, but if you want to go straight there, patriotacademy.com/250th.
That sounds amazing, and I love it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if you're in Texas and you're near there, you want to be at Patriot Academy this July 4th. So I want to go back to what you mentioned before, which I thought was really important, that the celebration doesn't end on July 4th. It really is just beginning. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of giving a speech on behalf of our COS New Jersey team at their 2026 Trenton Day at the New Jersey State House.
Nice.
And as I was preparing for that speech, I researched the Battle of Trenton. And there were two things in particular that struck me about that miraculous victory. One was that this battle was a clear example of the protection of divine providence that our founders asked for in the Declaration of Independence. Because only 2 American soldiers died, and they died on the march to Trenton. None died during the actual battle. And then the second thing that struck me was the courage and gallantry of the soldiers under Washington's command at that time. After months of defeat, after watching thousands of their fellow soldiers leave and go home, These tired, beleaguered men crossed the Delaware in the dead of night during bitter cold and severe weather, including rain, sleet, snow, ice, and then they went on to win a major victory in the War for Independence. So, Rick, forgive me for that long setup to this question.
I love it.
But how can we inspire and draw out that same spirit of 1776 in our fellow citizens today when our situation is not nearly as dire as it was in the winter of 1776?
Oh man, I love that, bro. That's a great reminder that no matter how bleak it gets, no matter who else quits the cause. In other words, like we have these moments in our movement where we're really, riled up and there's a lot of people joining and the rallies are big and everybody's fired up and we're seeing some results. But like in any movement, you're going to have moments where you have either a defeat or a setback or just slows down or just drags on for so long that some people get out and give up. And so when that happens, and it will happen again as we go through this for the next 10 years, or for, frankly, the press freedom's eternal vigilance forever until we're not 6 feet under. But when that happens, think about what you just said, because that night on Christmas night, Washington was down to about 2,500 troops. So he had shrunk from about 25,000 to 2,500. So most people had left. 90% had left, given up. Most people in the world had given up. Other countries were saying, no, we're not going to help. Most Americans thought the cause was lost. As you said, we'd had defeat after defeat in New York, and it basically mopped the floor with us. It was bad, man. It looked very, very bleak. And yet Washington had the courage. His troops had as you said, they had enough faith in him. They had the grit to see it through. Courage is one thing, to step up. Grit to see it through after you step up is another thing. And they did both, as you said. I mean, they marched 9 miles in the snow. They said that most of these guys didn't even have, boots. They were wrapping their feet in burlap. You could follow them by the blood in the snow. It was tough, man. And even crossing in a snowstorm, it was ugly, ugly, ugly. And the password that night on the other side of the Delaware was victory or death. That was their mindset. Victory or death, marching in the snow without shoes, 9 miles to defeat the very professional soldiers that had just, tore you apart just a couple of months before, weeks before. I mean, and you think about the Hessian soldiers, that's like the Navy SEALs of that day. These were professional soldiers, way better trained than our guys. So it was an incredible moment. It turned the entire revolution. He went up to 15,000 troops within just a few weeks as a result of that, as word got out. It was a big, big deal. And I think it is something for us to learn from and to recognize. There's going to be some in our movement that have that staying power, man. They've got the grit and they're just the steady, they've got the steadfastness to see it through even in the tough times. We need them desperately. There's going to be some that leave and hopefully come back, but even if they don't, we find other troops that are willing. And we've certainly seen that in our movement, both with COS, with restoring the Constitution itself, where people have come and gone. That's okay. It's okay. There's seasons for everybody. We need the people that are going to be the steadfast troops that stay in it for the long haul. And I'm so thankful for the people in COS that have done that, for the people with Patriot Academy that have done that. But I just think we're at a great moment where this is kind of the swelling back up. The 250th is a chance to really remind people why we're doing what we're doing, why we're saving the Constitution, why a constitutional republic is worth defending. And the Declaration gives us that. So use the 250th to get people to study those principles and then really hone in on that line that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. And that's what we do. Anytime we get involved in civics and involved in our government, we're altering or abolishing. We're altering it back to the way it was designed to be. We're abolishing departments that are no longer useful or were never constitutional in the first place. That's really what COS is all about, is we recognize that our government has become destructive of these ends. Truth, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, consent of the governed, all the things Jefferson listed before that line are the things that government has in fact become destructive of. So we're doing our job as citizens. We're getting involved, altering or abolishing it, getting it back in its lane so it can be a blessing. And so we can have another 250 years, should the Lord tarry, that we'd have another 250 years of freedom in our country. That's what this is all about.
Amen to that. And, as you're talking about these words, courage, grit, steadfastness, I'm just imagining what this spirit of 1776 looks like. And man, if there were people in our country that are in desperate need of that type of spirit of 1776, it would be the members of our United States Congress, particularly the United States Senate. Their continued intransigence toward the will of the people, such as their refusal to pass the Save America Act, has started to cost them. Your state of Texas just sent Senator John Cornyn off to retirement, as Attorney General Ken Paxton, a COS supporter, I should add, defeated him in the Republican primary last week. So, Rick, do you think this is the start of a movement to unseat these entrenched DC elites, or is this just a one-off victory that happened there in Texas?
No, I think this spirit is all over the country right now. And of course we saw Cassidy get defeated. I think there's been 4 defeated so far, and it wasn't close. I mean, Paxton won by over 20 points. A lot of people are giving all the credit to Trump. It was not the Trump endorsement that won this race for Paxton. That helped. I mean, I do think it speaks well, but Paxton was already surging way ahead. This is, we've been trying to get rid of Cornyn for decades. I actually started a draft David Barton for U.S. Senate campaign in 2014 and tried to get Barton to run against him. He almost did it, and I think we might have beat him back then, but he had so much money. This was the first time the money didn't matter. Well over $100 million that Cornyn spent that should have been spent in other Senate races to help shore up the Senate. But, these are selfish politicians, like you said, in the swamp that have this DC mentality. It's about them. It's not about the movement. It's not about the cause. And I think what Paxton showed right after the first round on March 3rd, when it became a runoff and they were the top 2 vote getters, he showed that it was about the cause when he said, either if you'll pass the SAVE Act, I'll get out of the race. That's more important than me going to Washington, D.C. It's the most important piece of legislation that could be passed. And he threw down the gauntlet. And I told him, I saw him a couple of weeks after that, and I said, Ken, that was the most brilliant political move I've ever seen in my life. It totally changed the whole race. It kept Trump from endorsing Cornyn, which we all know Trump's terrible at endorsements and often endorses the rhino that happens to still be in office. And I think that was what was about to happen. And so when Paxton said, hey, I'll fall on my sword, I'll get out of the race if you pass this most important piece of legislation because the country's more important than I am. And then, of course, Cornyn could not get it passed or refused to get it passed because Cornyn was great at talking, like most swamp creatures, talk a good game out front, run the ads, but then behind the scenes, cut us off at the knees and not do the things that need to be done. It started, Ken just kept gaining momentum after that. And then, we had an event for Ken in my hometown of Dripping Springs about a week before the election, and you could feel it, man. Everybody knew and it was a couple of days after the Trump endorsement, but the momentum was already there. So I think that is more than a one-off. I think that's happening across the country. I think we're seeing it in some of the congressional races as well. I think, honestly, you see it even in that LA, mayoral race with Spencer Pratt and the idea that a Republican could possibly win in LA. I don't know if he will. November is going to be a different ball game than this runoff was, but just the energy and the people that got involved and the people from the middle that came to the Republican. I do think it's a movement, and it's a long game. You know this. Most of the people that are watching know this. This is a long game, and it's not going to be an overnight success. But Trump has laid the groundwork for the disruptors to be able to win. And so I'm thankful. I think Paxton will be a champion for our issues in Washington, D.C. I think, honestly, man, election night, I've never had an election where everybody I endorsed won. Usually it's at best 50-50 or one or two of my guys will win. But last Tuesday in Texas, man, all the statewide candidates I endorsed won. All of our local candidates won. And so I'm thrilled. I think that's obviously, that's the primary, that's the runoff. November's the real work, right? We've got to really get serious in these races. COS had a banner last few weeks, man. We've won some fantastic races in some state legislative races against people that had been, roadblocks for us. So, man, I think the trend is really, really good. I think we've got to pounce on it, though. Man, it's all about follow through.
Absolutely. And speaking of follow through, I'm sorry to say that there are some state legislators that also need that injection of the spirit of 1776. As you know, Rick, Kansas passed our resolution earlier this year, becoming state number 20 to pass the COS resolution. States like Tennessee, Missouri, and South Carolina also passed important legislation to further prepare for an Article 5 convention. And yet there are still legislators that have bought into the fear propagated by our opposition. What advice do you have for our activists as they attempt to persuade these legislators to be courageous and pass our resolution?
Yeah, stay the course. I mean, some of the people that have been against us for years are either getting defeated or in some cases coming over to us. And that's not, I shouldn't say it's surprising because civil discourse is supposed to get us to the right outcome. But I've been pleased. And so I think it's stay the course, man. Just keep going. A lot of those people that have been entrenched forever, they know that eventually this has to happen. There's an awakening right now that it's part of it's the spiritual awakening. But I think a lot of it too is just the fact that people are realizing the swamp is never going to change itself. Because even like the Paxton victory, I mean, that's, one vote in the Senate. It's not going to ultimately right the ship. What it's going to do is give us a little bit more momentum towards the real changes that have to take place by restoring these through amendments, restoring these clauses in the Constitution that have been ignored or really twisted by the Supreme Court. So I do think there's an awakening happening even in those legislative circles. But I do, I think the shift towards just we have to defeat a lot of these people that have prevented this most important change from happening. It's sort of like Ken Paxton throwing down the gauntlet with the SAVE Act. I think we've got to do that in these states, throwing down the gauntlet and saying Article 5 is the only way we're going to be able to save the Constitution in the long run. And it's the only thing that's going to save these states from being overrun, because Washington will change. The pendulum will swing. You're going to have another Biden presidency at some point, another auto pen administration of a leftist. I'm not a doomsdayer at all. I'm an optimistic guy. John, we could end up with a Gavin Newsom as president. You could end up with an AOC as vice president and potentially president in the future. People need to realize that the country has done crazy things like that and very well could swing back that direction. So the only thing that prevents that kind of an administration from doing what the Biden administration, jailing their opposition, weaponizing the federal agencies, all of those things that happened that were so bad and were potentially going to be way worse if there had been not another Biden administration, but a back-to-back left-wing administration. The only thing that stops that is a convention. We have to have a convention and put them back in their jurisdictional box to give states the autonomy and the jurisdictional authority to prevent that from happening. So that part, I think, is what is starting to break through to the general public. Is we don't want to go through that again. And as you know, we've got some of our friends in the middle or even on the left that are finally going, you know what? I don't want Clarence Thomas telling me what to do. I don't want Donald Trump telling me what to do. And we're like, we don't want them telling you what to do either. So how about getting some autonomy for your state by supporting a convention of states? So we might have some strange bedfellows before this is over.
But, we started this interview talking about the excitement that we have built up, the freedom trucks, everything that's been going on. And then you hit us with a Gavin Newsom presidency and AOC as vice president. Come on, Rick. Come on. But no, but what you're talking about is so true. And that's why, honestly, when I look at some of these elections, particularly the presidential election, I think because there is so much power that has been put into the federal government, which is not how this system was designed. That was not the purpose of it. Right. It's almost like we go from one monarchy, if you will, during one administration to another monarchy in the next. And the anxiety that gets built up over this causes people to really lose their minds over these presidential elections, which they're important. Don't get me wrong, but that's not what the founders intended. And that's right. In order for us to really deal with that, is we need to have a convention to restore the balance of power back to the state legislatures. And that will then prevent us from having these huge swings with the pendulum right now, in changes from one administration to the next.
Yeah, man. Those people today that say, can't we just all get along, or why do we have to always be fighting so much, and what can bring people together? I mean, this is the solution for that. This is what gets us off of each other's throats. And the boot on the neck of both sides feel that way. I mean, the left feels that way when we're pushing our policies and getting things done that we want to get done. We feel that way when they're in charge and they're doing. The solution is to let the states live and act and pass laws according to the dictates of their conscience and the way that they want to live. Get the federal government out of it and let people vote with their feet and move to the states that reflect their values. And then we, the few things that the Constitution says that we're united on as a nation aren't even the most controversial things. And even if they are, they're not the things that would split us and cause people to have, like you said, the tension and just the stress. And this is a beautiful solution to keeping America together, but letting Americans live the way that they want to live. And I don't think there's any other way to avoid civil war. I know that sounds maybe shocking to some people, but this is the solution to keeping us from splitting as a nation. Otherwise, that hatred and that constant conflict and people feeling like it's all on the line. The rhetoric from Joe Biden of threatening the very foundation of the country and all those kind of things. Honestly, we say the same thing sometimes. So to prevent that from happening, you've got to have federalism. You nailed it. It's what the founders designed. True federalism lets the states decide on most every issue. There's only a handful of things that the federal government decides, and then you can vote with your feet. And if a state goes off the rails and has horrible economic outcomes, they learn from it. But right now they don't learn from it because we bail them out with the federal government. We need to let the marketplace of ideas happen and let bad ideas come to the forefront and let them test them out in some states. Let that be a laboratory of freedom, and then let good ideas be used in some states. And when you see those companies flocking and people flocking to Florida and Texas and Tennessee, then you should start going, what are they doing that we should be doing so that we can get that? I mean, even New York's governor and let's see, who was it? I think it was Minneapolis, or it was Seattle's mayor that had initially said horrible things about a Starbucks of all people, and gone out to these rallies and said we're going to boycott Starbucks when the left is boycotting Starbucks. Things are weird, and she had to walk all that back because she's like, wait a minute, we're going to lose the very people that are paying the taxes. So that's a long, long way of saying you want more peace, you want more harmony in America. You got to do an Article 5 convention so that the states can govern the way they want to govern, and people can live among people that share their values, and we'll all be better off, left and right.
Last question I have for you, Rick. I saw recently that a number of conservative and Christian speakers, authors, and podcasters were led on a tour of the United States Capitol by Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. As they came to the spot where John Quincy Adams had a stroke on the House floor, Speaker Johnson shared with them the story about John Quincy, the hellhound of abolition. And for those in our audience who may be unaware of this story, John Quincy Adams is the only president to leave the office of the presidency and be elected to serve in Congress. And he primarily did this to fight for the abolition of slavery. He was so determined to rid America of the scourge of slavery, he would frustrate his colleagues because he would be constantly bringing it up, even though all of his motions were ultimately failed. He still kept going back to that same well. When asked why he persisted against all odds, John Quincy Adams said, "Duty is ours. The results belong to God." To me, that is a very liberating concept, because all we need to do is focus on our duty, and the Lord will handle everything else. So, Rick, with America's 250th drawing near, how do we, as COS and Patriot Academy supporters, do our duty today, grounded in faith, history, and courage, so that God may not only bless this nation with survival, but allow us to thrive again?
It's honestly the only way to have peace in this fight. It's the only way to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and sleep in peace, knowing I did everything I could today, regardless of the results. I did my duty. That mindset is I think the most important thing to adopt, especially for these long haul battles. I loved that video, by the way. It was, David Barton and I have given that tour for 30 years at the Capitol and stood there and over that gold plate where John Quincy Adams sat and told that story, and to have the Speaker of the House do the same thing. And he learned it from David Barton, of course. But when he did that, it just brought it to a whole nother level, and it was so powerful. And he just absolutely love it. And that room it's an incredible room. It's known as Statuary Hall now. It was the House Chamber, and there's 6 or 7. I did that on purpose. There's actually 7, 6, 7. Anyway, there's 6 or 7 of those gold plates in that room. And you're right. John Quincy is the only one that was president first and then served. The other 6 are presidents that served in that House chamber and then went on to be president. And the cool thing is he sat there, that spot where he sat, it's a perfectly parabolic room. And so the exact opposite side of the room, if you stand in those 2 spots, you can hear each other with just a whisper because of the way that the audio works in there. But the leader of the pro-slavery forces sat in the opposite spot. And John Quincy Adams knew that. And so he would literally, when his guys would come around, just a handful of them that were, the really working to get rid of slavery, and they would strategize, he'd say, let's get up and go over to this other area so that the other side couldn't hear him. When the other side would gather around their leader's desk and strategize, he would just put his head on his desk, and they would look over and say, oh, the old man's asleep. And he was actually listening to everything about their strategy. So I love John Quincy Adams and all the things that happened in that room. The end of the story, though, is he never got to see, slavery end. He did, as Mike Johnson explains in that video, he had a stroke right there on the spot, and he died 3 days later in the speaker's office. That's right there off the floor. Used to be the speaker's office, but that was 17 years, by the way, 17 years that he fought to end slavery. And when that reporter came to him and asked him that question, and he gave that line, duty is ours, results are God's, it was about 13 years into the battle. So he still fought for another 4 years after that, dies in Congress without any of the victories. But this young kid came and served in that last term of John Quincy Adams, is really just for the last few months of that term, and was mentored by John Quincy Adams, such to the extent that he was a pallbearer at John Quincy Adams' funeral. This kid in his 30s doesn't get reelected and ends up running for about 5 different offices, all of which he loses. He doesn't win another election for almost 15 years, but when he does win an election, it's president of the United States. His gold plate is in that room as well. And of course, it's Abraham Lincoln. And he implemented the same things that he had learned from John Quincy Adams. So I think it's the perfect story to close with, because in the 250th, you don't know who you might be modeling the principles of liberty for, or modeling the John Quincy Adams duty is ours, results are God's mindset and joy and steadfastness and grit to see this thing through, are modeling leadership skills for. Someone's watching you as you fight for COS. Someone is watching your tenacity and your just willingness to stay in the fight, and they're learning from that. And you may not see COS pass in your state during your fight. It may not, but somebody's watching you that is going to get it done. I may not get to see some of the constitutional amendments that I want in the Constitution passed before something happens to me. I don't know. Lord may take me tomorrow. But I know that there are young people watching me right now and learning from me that will carry the torch forward. It's the same for everybody watching this tonight. There's somebody watching you. There's a Lincoln watching you as the John Quincy Adams. So keep that positive attitude. Keep that attitude that God's in charge. Keep that peace. Keep that joy that you can only have when you know that James, talks about it. Count it all joy when you experience various trials, because God's using it to make us perfect and complete. So keep that attitude. I think that's a great way to do the 250th. Duty is ours. So let's do our duty during the 250th. Let's celebrate, but let's study. Let's go deep into the Declaration of Independence. Let's learn the principles, and let's raise civic literacy during the 250th. I believe as a result of that, we'll get Convention of States passed. We'll have the convention. We'll save our Constitution and save our republic. And then I'd kind of like to have a convention every 2 or 3 years after that. But let's get the first one.
Amen. Amen. Rick, it is such an honor to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and Patriot Academy in this fight for our liberty. Thank you for everything that you do for us, and God bless you, sir.
Man, God bless you. Y'all keep it up, and we'll see you soon.
All right. You take care. Well, that was a bit of a long interview, but I think it was well worth it. Rick Green has just been such a tremendous supporter of Convention of States, and it's an honor whenever we have the opportunity to sit down and talk with him. And he's just a great guest to have. Before we move on, I did also want to give a shout out to our Texas team. They're going to have a huge presence next week at the GOP convention there in the state of Texas, which is a massive event. It is the largest state Republican convention in the nation. June 11th through the 13th is when that convention is taking place. Our team's going to be there. We may even have a surprise guest in attendance. So if you're there in Texas and you can make it to the convention, highly recommend that you do check out the COS table and support our Convention of States team as they fight to make sure the pro COS plank remains in the party platform there in Texas. Also, want to give a shout out. I was talking about holidays earlier, and I forgot about Father's Day, which is coming up later up this month. And so, if you need to shop for your dad or your grandparent or grandfather or someone you love that's a father, be sure to check out shopconventionofstates.com. Now, while I don't know if there's a sale that's going to be going on, I have a hunch they'll have something special going on for Father's Day. So I did want to encourage you to check that out. So shopconventionofstates.com. That's the Article 5 outfitters, and check that out for Father's Day. Okay, and with that, let's check the Minutemen Mailbag. So tonight we had another good question, I think, that we put out there. It was very timely because at the time that we put this question out after the last call, this was something that was still in the news. And frankly, it's something that may not be in the news right now, but it's something that's always on the back of our minds. And so the question that we asked for you to respond to was, if you could ask every politician and pundit to answer one question about the attempt on Trump's life at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, what would it be? And so we got some great responses, and Patricia Tuzo wrote in and she said, do you now see why the White House needs its own secure ballroom? And Patricia, I certainly do. And I think President Trump made that point clear after that event. We do need to protect the president. And it's a shame that we've gotten to this point in our nation. But I mean, there are too many threats that are out there, and we need to make sure that the president is secure. So I think the White House putting that ballroom together makes a lot of sense. Scott Luttrell wrote in and he said, does it feel a little different when they come for you? And that's a great question to ask the politicians and pundits. You know, it's very easy to kind of talk about things in the abstract, but when you're there and you're about to be participating in a dinner, to have that happen there, I would imagine would probably wake some people up a little bit. Of course, we also and I say that it wasn't in the news, but I'm forgetting, what was it, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago where there were some shots again at the White House, outside of the White House. And so, yeah, hopefully it's starting to wake some of these reporters up that it's dangerous out there, and perhaps we need to tone down the rhetoric a little bit. And Linda Sue wrote in and she said, were you proud of yourselves for stealing bottles of liquor from the tables as you left? I didn't see that, but apparently that's a thing. Linda, that's crazy. And I don't know why people would do that. I don't know. That's just craziness right there. But yeah, we really need to do a better job of toning down the rhetoric and making sure that people know political violence is not the solution. It has no business in what we are trying to accomplish here in the United States of America. We're a free nation. We should be able to speak and speak freely. That's the beauty of the First Amendment, and it's protected by the Second Amendment. Yeah, we need to do better than this as a nation. And I just want to thank all of you who wrote in for our mailbag question this month. But I do want to mention the mailbag question for next month, which I'm excited about. And I can't wait to read this on next program. So the question that we're going to be asking all of you to answer is, as we look back on the 250 incredible years of America's independence, what are your hopes for the next 250 years for America? And if you want to answer that question and be read on the air, go to conventionofstates.com/mailbag and submit your answer. I love that question. I'm really excited to talk about that. I'm excited to celebrate America, and I think that's going to be basically what we're going to be doing next month for the program, which, by the way, folks, that brings us to the conclusion of this one. So just a reminder, all of the COS at Home shows are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the next show is going to be on Wednesday, July 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern. And my guest will be nationally known speaker, best-selling author and historian, former U.S. congressional candidate, and president of American Minute, Inc., and that is William J. Federer. I'm really looking forward to this interview. If you've never had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Federer or perhaps read one of his books, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of American history, and I think this is going to be an amazing program right before America's 250th birthday. So be sure to join us Wednesday, July 1st for that conversation. You will not want to miss it. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I've loved this program. It's been a joy to bring it to all of you. I hope that you have enjoyed it as well, and that it was helpful to you and edifying. Thanks again to Rick Green for joining us tonight. Actually recording with us earlier this morning. And a big thanks to the legendary producer G for all of his hard work behind the scenes. Of course, the greatest thanks goes to all of you that continue to support and give to the Convention of States movement. It's important to remember that despite all the problems we currently face, ladies and gentlemen, you and I, we the people, are the solution. Now, before we close out entirely, I mentioned earlier how we try to honor some of the great holidays we celebrate here in America. I even snuck in Father's Day before. At the conclusion of our last show, I mentioned what my family would be doing to honor Memorial Day. And we did, in fact, go and plant some flags at the Sarasota National Cemetery as part of Erin's American Heritage Girls team. But I still felt like we didn't honor it enough during the last show. And so tonight, before we close out, I wanted to read a letter that I believe epitomizes the spirit of Memorial Day, and it is known as the Bixby Letter. This was a letter written by President Abraham Lincoln to the mother of 5 sons who were believed to have died fighting during the Civil War. And I say believed because historians now suggest that only 2 sons actually died in the battle and died in battle. The other 3, there are a couple of different stories regarding them. But upon hearing of these deaths or learning of these deaths, President Lincoln wrote to Mrs. Bixby the following letter. Executive Mansion, Washington, November 21st, 1864. Dear Madam, I have been shown in the files of the War Department a statement of the Adjutant General of Massachusetts that you are the mother of 5 sons who have died gloriously on the field of battle. I feel how weak and fruitless must be any word of mine which would attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming. But I cannot refrain from tendering you the consolation that may be found in the thanks of the Republic they died to save. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. Yours very sincerely and respectfully, Abraham Lincoln. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all had a blessed Memorial Day and took the time to honor our fallen heroes. Join us next month as we continue to celebrate America with Mr. Federer. Thank you again for all of your support of Convention of States. God bless you and good night.